What's going on, guys? Arekkz here. Welcome back to another video for Borderlands 3, and today I want to talk more about the new DLC, Guns, Love and Tentacles, and take a look at some more legendary items, legendary weapons, shields, artifacts, that kind of stuff. Thanks to the awesome guys over at 2K UK. I've had a chance to play through the DLC. Honestly, it is really cool. I genuinely enjoyed my time with this one. It's probably, of the two that we've had so far, my favorite one. I just like the setting for it. I like the, the monsters you fight. I like some of the weapons. And just in general, it's pretty cool. Also, there's one part of it that kind of has a distinct sort of Monster Hunter vibe. I really like that. So, yeah. Definitely super cool. Hopefully you guys enjoy it too. Let me know how you guys get on when you jump in. But today, we're turning our attention to some more legendary items, played through, and we've kind of got like a good deal of them. If I was just kind of using Moxie as a comparison point, I'd like to think I've got the majority, if not all of the legendary weapons. Moxie had around 10 that you get from drops, plus 2 that came from quests. So in this video, we're going to be going through all the stuff that I've got so far. All of these come from just drops while playing through the DLC. And one in particular, which I'll touch on when we cover it, is from a particular boss. Everything else seems to just drop randomly from pretty much anything. So if we turn our attention firstly to actually my favorite weapon, of all the weapons I've got and tested so far, this one I really like. It's called the Venomous Trained Soul Render, and it's a dial assault rifle, so it has the ability to switch between full auto and semi-auto. And the thing that I really like about this one, obviously it has corrosive damage, which is quite nice, but the actual soul rend kind of ability, the red text for it says, picture a soul, now rend that thing. And what happens is that when you fire this weapon, it fires out the typical corrosive damage associated with the weapon, but on top of that, these skulls, these kind of spiritual skulls, kind of like the ones you would have seen in the Halloween event, also fly at the gun at the same time. It only happens when you appear to be hitting enemies as opposed to just firing into the ether. But when you fire out, they home in on the enemies, and they seem to do quite a good deal of damage. This actually seems to be a pretty strong weapon. It might not necessarily be, the strongest, the new meta weapon, but from the ones that I've been using and from the ones that I've been testing, it definitely feels like it hits pretty hard, and just in general, it's a cool looking weapon. The way it behaves with the whole kind of skulls and everything, I just really like it. Genuinely, one of my favorite weapons in this DLC. Moving on from there, we have a weapon called More Bruising Storos's Burn. Now this is the one weapon that I believe only comes from a particular boss. There's a boss that you actually fight, midway through the DLC, and this appears to drop this weapon because we found that a few times and it keeps on continually dropping that. Meanwhile, everything else seems to come from a variety of different sources. So I'm pretty sure this one is tied to that, and it kind of sort of makes sense because that is a fire-focused enemy. But this one, the red text of this says alongside was heard. But the cool thing about this weapon is that there's a chance on break to combust. And when you combust, it guarantees critical hits, increases your fire damage, and lowers the shot cost. But you do, as a player, take damage whilst you're in the combust status. So it's a COV weapon, obviously continuous fire. You can either, get it to just continually fire and break, or you can manage that. But of course, tying in with the combust mechanic, you do kind of want this one to be breaking. So yeah, pretty cool. Looks awesome. Loving the color scheme on it. Fire weapon. There's a lot of, ice enemies in this game because, of course, we're in this sort of frozen tundra area. So definitely has its value. Moving on from there, we then have a Maliwan shotgun, the binary proficient insider, or just the insider, because of course there's different variations of this. My one has radiation and corrosive damage. Of course, being Maliwan, you can swap between the elements. And this one just fires out in this kind of wide shotgun style burst, but fires out these sort of elemental energy projectiles. Feels like it hits pretty hard, pretty strong shotgun, and specifically, at least with this role, having radiation and corrosive. I'm not too sure, necessarily if there are other permutations of this one, but the one that I got, of course, works like this, but just feels like it's a pretty strong, hard-hitting shotgun. Next up, we have the nonstop Fire Sale Flammadiddle Plus. This one, if you guys saw my video the other day from the preview event, we got a chance to test this one out. However, I have since had a chance to try this out a little bit more, and this one is actually a pretty good TDR shotgun. Again, hits very hard. This, of course, has incendiary damage or flame damage, so, again, pretty good against some of those ice enemies. But what's cool is, obviously, when you throw this one, it then fires whilst in midair. However, in some situations, if you throw this and it connects with the enemies and just detonates on contact, it actually does quite a big deal of damage. We were kind of doing a boss fight the other day, and just throwing the Flammadiddles into the boss, all of us using it, actually ripped through the health pretty fast. Now, that may well, of course, been modifiers in our favor, but principally, feels like a pretty nice, meaty shotgun. Now, moving on from there to take a little break from the weapons and talk about the artifact. This one dropped, and this is actually really, really cool. It's the Pearl of Ineffable Knowledge, and the red text says, knowing is half the battle, but with this, the description says, consecutive successful hits grant 1% increased damage per hit up to 15 times, so 15%. And at maximum stacks, it adds an additional 20% damage. So this is basically just a flat damage buff, continual fire. So pair this with something that, something like an assault rifle or something, with like fast fire rate, and you have a pretty nice recipe for just flat damage increase with this thing. Another one on the sort of items front is, of course, the Contraband torch. This is a shield. This one, I will say, not that great, or doesn't necessarily feel that great. It says inflammable means flammable, and basically, with this one, it shoots out fireballs around the player when the shield is depleted that deal damage. We've seen those kind of things before. Plus, there's a chance to absorb bullets as ammo, and a chance to reflect projectiles while shielded. But when you compare it to some of the other shields that you can have, honestly, I don't really see this one being like a best in slot, being something that I personally use myself. So, turning our attention then back to the weapons, we have the Speed Loading Bowie Love Drill, which is a Jacob's pistol. And this one, red text says, till death us depart. You have this little sort of diamond above where the sort of, aiming iron sights would be, I guess, for the kind of ring, given the ceremony and whatnot. And this one has a 20% chance to deal double damage as shock damage, and critical hits will ricochet one bullet to the nearest enemy, typical Jacob's thing. So obviously being, doesn't actually naturally carry an element, but you have a 20% chance to deal that out as shock, and you do see that proc quite frequently. We then have the Synergized Aldridian. I again spoke about this one in the sort of preview build, but having had a chance to use this more myself, I really like this weapon. This is a Hyperion SMG, and again, the red text for this says they bound the ones they knew, there were more. However, the important thing for this is that, keep in mind, this Hyperion weapon doesn't have an element by default, but it switches element on reload, and of course the Aldridian shield reduces elemental damage by 20%. So you have that kind of cool, typical, well, I would say Hyperion, but Aldridian shield. But the nice thing is, this basically has the ability to switch between all different elements. It's an SMG, fires fast, you're going to be reloading pretty frequently, 35 rounds in the mag, and every time you reload, you have a randomly selected element. So you'll just be suddenly going through and doing fire damage, then freezing an enemy, then doing shock, and then doing corrosive and radiation. It's really, really cool. So honestly, I didn't get a chance to use it too extensively during the preview build, but now that I've had it and I've run through the DLC with it, this is honestly another one of my favorite weapons. After that, we have the Hort Dame Serial Killer. Again, spoke about this one in the preview build, but this is another COV weapon, pretty cool one. The main thing for this one is that killing an enemy grants increased damage, fire rate, and reduces heat shock cost, and the effect will stack up to 3 times. It's got fire damage, so again, pretty useful against some of those ice enemies, but when compared to, say, the other COV one, the one that drops on the boss, this one is definitely not one that I've been using too much. After that, another new one this time around called the Shocker, just straight up Shocker, and it is a shock damage shotgun, Torg weapon, and this one is really cool because when you fire out these projectiles, it's only got a very small magazine, so you are reloading quite frequently, but it fires out these huge, high damage, energy projectiles, energy beams, energy balls, and when they collide with the target, they do a lot of damage. So while yes, you don't get many shots, and it is quite slow moving, so if there are enemies that are running away a lot, it's kind of quite easy for them to miss, but when you do land with this, it is pretty powerful. It also, of course, consumes 2 ammo per shot, so while the magazine is 4, you basically have 2 shots before you need to reload. After that, we then have the Dastardly Unseen Threat, a new sniper rifle. This one is, of course, a Jacob's one. So, typical Jacob's behavior. When you land a critical hit, it has a chance to ricochet bullets to nearby enemies, but this one ricochets 3 bullets to nearby enemies and also deals quite a large amount of damage. It just seems to be a pretty hard-hitting sniper rifle. Didn't really notice anything other than the triple ricochet bullet thing. So, yeah, pretty strong. Looks kind of cool. Weird leopard print on it, but definitely very sort of fitting for the DLC. And then finally, the very last one is the Deluxe Supercharged Anarchy Plus, or just the Anarchy because, again, various different variations of this one. This one, Comes in shock damage. The red text for this is the stacks. Basically, every automatic reload or kill grants 30% damage and reduces your accuracy, and this can stack up to 10 times. So obviously, once you get to max stack, you're not going to have a great deal of accuracy, but you are going to have a nice amount of damage boost. A lot of enemies in this have shields, so of course having the ability to have shock versus that and just rip through the shields is pretty handy. So yeah, definitely a nice weapon. Anyway, that's it for the time being. Let's look at all the weapons we had drop during our playtime. As mentioned, there are probably a couple more that come from the quest. There are, much like the Moxie DLC, a couple of collectible quests throughout the DLC we have yet to complete, so they will typically, or most likely, lead to a couple more legendary weapons. But assuming that this DLC has a similar amount to the Moxie one, then this is probably the majority of the weapons. Anyway, that's it for the time being. By all means, let me know in the comments down below how you guys get on. Let me know if you guys have found any other legendary weapons that we have not spoken about. And of course, keep it locked for plenty more Borderlands content. I really hope you guys enjoyed that video. Remember to hit that subscribe button and also click on the little bell icon to turn on notifications so you don't miss my next upload. Also, don't forget, you can check out TwoSixNine and Paradise Central streaming over on Twitch 6 days a week. You can find a link to the multi-stream in the description box down below. Be sure to drop by and get involved. Thanks again for watching. Take it easy. Catch you next time. Peace out.